And I'm inviting you to be in my video game!
Wait, Princess Sparklemuffin, some people might think that this game only has white, straight, cisgender playable characters, making them outraged! We haven't even gotten to the gameplay description and already this is off the rails! I can't believe I'm going to say this, but... Dear God!
So, if my wish comes true, Bossfight Song of Sparklemuffin will be a comedy-driven, turn-based, JRPG-style PC game with inspirations from The Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy III, and classic adventure games like Monkey Island and Quest for Glory. So, what happens in this game? Stuff like this! Where I get to adventure with my friends, and I want you to be one of those friends, which is an opportunity to have a guaranteed friend. And how often do you get that chance? So you, or any character you want to be, can be an NPC, quest giver, or even a sub-boss, immortalized in a video game. And a small number of people get to write stories that go in the game. How fun is that? I hope you'll become my newest friend and go on this adventure with me. But we need you to back this Kickstarter now, okay? So we can include as many different kinds of people as possible.
Hello, everyone. I am so sorry. I was having audio issues. I couldn't. At first, my mic was acting up, and then I couldn't hear anyone. So I apologize for being so late. But today we have with us special guest Liana, and she is doing a Kickstarter with Mary Jess. We also have Bianca. How are you guys doing today? Start with Liana. How are you?
All right. Well, we're finally on. That was a comedy of errors. The audio gods were not kind to us. Poor Mary Jess. He's like an audio guy. He's a music guy, and he's going.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Mary Jess. You're new to me.
Well, I guess you could say I'm a trained opera singer, and I'm also an artist, graphic designer, and I'm originally from Ecuador, of all places.
Oh, awesome. And I think everyone knows Bianca, but Bianca, how are you?
Bianca.
Hi. How are you guys? I'm good. Thank you. Please and thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into other subjects, but first I want to talk about the little video that played in the beginning, and that has to do with Liana's Kickstarter, which is...
Was that me or
No.
Oh, okay? We lost
Not
Tristan
again.
Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Whoa!
Can you hear me?
Oh, she's back,
Okay, good.
and she's gone again. Yeah, this is the issue we were having before the stream, guys. This is why we were late.
The sound goblins kidnap people.
Yeah, Tristan's mic keeps. Oh,
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 we've lost
no.
her.
lost completely.
Where are you?
I give Restream credit. The host just dropped out, and the stream continues. But yeah, this is what was happening. Oh, Tristan's back, kind of. I think.
Working?
You're back. I said credit to Restream. The host dropped out. The stream continued.
I know, I love it. The one time when me and Bianca were actually streaming, it was in the morning stream, and I lost Wi-Fi completely. Like, thanks, awesome to an awesome provider. And it went out completely, and Bianca's just sitting here like keeping the stream happy, keeping it going. I'm like, you are truly a trooper when it comes to it. I love it.
Just talking about animus.
Yeah, wonder what's going on the internet right now that things keep taking a crap.
I know. It's just, it was doing this to me yesterday. I had a birthday stream, and it was just anytime I would share anything, I would cut out. So I'm gonna have to go through my computer and see what's going on. But back to what we were talking about. Tell us a little bit about your Kickstarter.
Yeah, we're Mary Jess and I are making a game based on the Bossfight web series that I've been on the stream. You're nice enough to have me come on and talk about that. But it's as the video said, it's a classic turn-based JRPG with a lot of adventure game elements, and it's based on kind of little meta story that went on with Bossfight, with a fairy tale princess becomes the heroine of her own story, and she's got this band of misfit lovable oddballs and a poop throwing soul eating unicorn. And it starts off with a really simple story, a really simple quest to rescue her childhood nanny, her beloved childhood nanny, and it just goes from there. And much like the adventure games that it's based on, there's a lot of fairy tale tropes, pirate tropes, all that stuff, like all over the place, but it's very satirical. It's like a lot of that old, very kind of soft humor, but then there's a satirical edge. I think we're trying not to be mean, but we're pointed. Does that sound about right, Mary Jess? Like, we're not mean, we're just pointed.
I'd say so. I guess we always hew to the Carol Channing rule of parody, which is to never be malicious and to have a little bit of affection for the subject you're parodying, but you don't need to dip into the mean-spirited and mean-heartedness.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a holdover from Bossfight. Skewering the pop culture phenomenon surrounding a person and attacking the person as a person, to me, are extremely different things. And that's the line between sort of laugh with and like mean mock. I don't like, having been a YouTuber for long enough, I don't like savagely going after people. It's not fun.
Oh, I totally get it. I got a super chat from Dr. Soup. If you guys get a chance, check out her channel. She's awesome. Amber Heard took my Wi-Fi down. Yep. She found out where I live, and yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. But you're also doing these, like, what I thought was super cool was you can be an NPC. You can have a pet. Like, what brought you to do so, to have that idea?
Mary Jess and I have worked on quite a few crowdfunds as organizers, consultants together, and two main things inspired this approach to crowdfunding. One was the fact that when you do these in-game asset incentives, like you can have your portrait in a game, or you get your name on a tombstone, all this gets implemented in the last year to 2 years of development, and it is a sinkhole. The scope creep, the feature creep, it's not even a feature, it's just asset implementation grind. So we thought about it. There's nothing in the Kickstarter rules that said you can't do it this way. So like, why has nobody done it this way? The other thing is that being in a game is cool. The problem with a lot of these, be in a video game, have your character in a video game, is it's a few $100s. Right? Just for a basic stand there, get a picture in the game or something. It doesn't actually cost that. That's the add-on of, the big Kickstarter tiers of you get a copy of the game and the art book and your name in the credits and all these incentives. And we thought, let's open it up to people so that the people who are really excited about it can be part of it for a fairly affordable price, instead of it just being people who have a couple $100s to blow and then wait 2 years for anything to happen. Right. So that was the thinking behind it. And then, of course, the Patreon members said, can we have a pet instead of us? That's where the pets came from.
I love
The-
that. That's the idea I love. So you definitely have a Hush or a Bane, and I'm like, I can't decide who. Don't tell the other one. I love it. I love that idea. I was gonna ask next where that came from.
Yeah,
I do.
that's where it is. It's just somebody said I had a thing where people could put their pets pet photos on set in Bossfight, and so someone asked, "Are we going to do the same thing?" And I was like, "Why not do the same thing? Why can't we uh have people's because can you pet the dog is a meme, right?" And Mary Just is a bit crazy, and every time I ask him, "Can we do something?" he says, "Of course." I
Well, I thought it would be a great idea to just say, not only can you pet the dog in this game, you can also be the dog.
I love
Right,
it.
well, yeah, we are very furry friendly, as you can tell by Mary Jess' icon. We don't believe it is truly an inclusive experience unless you're pro furry. Furries spend money. We like furries.
I actually have a question for you, Liana. From Robert, he says, Liana, had the fans made a different story selection, like Sparklemuffin going bad, among others, would the game have come about? Was it always planned?
Oh, that's a bit of a complicated question. One of the things the Kickstarter backers got was a video that went through all the different alternate endings of the boss fight series. There was an ending where Princess Sparklemuffin became a capitalist mogul with Anne Reardon from episode 2. There was an ending where everybody died. There were a bunch of different endings based on the voting. The one I thought was the least likely to happen is status quo totally maintained, and that was the one that people voted for. And so I was like, okay. The original idea because much like the boss fight game, a few select people got a chance to write character backstories for the boss fight video series. And when they did those characters, we actually had them fill out pen and paper RPG sheets, like the Dungeons and Dragons character sheets for stats for the various characters. Of course, what we got back was cool and made it was an interesting exercise and it made things very clear. But of course, you put all those characters together, it was incredibly unbalanced. And Mary Just is a whiz with RPG Maker, and so it was just the fastest way to do what we wanted. We looked at some other engines, but we thought that classic JRPG look. The game has evolved since that alpha footage. That's why we put the alpha footage tag on. The battlers are going to be much more high resolution in the finished version. More of like I don't know, what would you say, more of a Chrono Trigger look, Mary Jess, than that straight
Well,
up classic Final Fantasy?
on this, because of their size, I would say
Yeah.
it's closer to Fantasy Star.
Fantasy Star. There you
Although
go,
it's
yeah.
you're not looking at them from the back. They're side view battlers, but they're taller
Yeah.
than what we originally were going for. So we originally had the Final Fantasy look, the chibi style, both in the world map and in the battlers. But then we expanded the resolution, and at that moment I went, now that we have the screen real estate, we can afford to have larger battlers. And of course, I say that all excited, and then I looked at the battler sheets and go, I'm going to have to make every single one of them again, don't I? Yep.
Every single one of those poses. Yeah, but it also gives kind of a cool zoom in effect that we weren't getting. Of course, all the cities and everything scaled on the big map, but the characters didn't. And it would have worked fine, but we without getting massive scope creep. You could tell I'm a producer, right? You were going to hear scope creep and feature creep come out of me so much as something to be avoided like the plague. It's a thing in game dev, but without massive feature creep, we're going to try to create the highest quality silly poop and fart jokes, funny fairy tale princess game with furries and an eclectic cast we possibly can.
Yes, when gamers get eaten by Grooves, game devs get eaten by feature creep.
Yeah. Does the chat know what feature creep is? Sometimes people don't know this term.
I have no idea.
Okay, yeah, feature creep or scope creep is when basically it's what happened, I think, to Cyberpunk 2077. It eats games. You want to do all the things, and there's nobody going, no, guys, we're going to save it for the sequel. We have to make the best game we can with what we have now. We have to ship in 2 years. And so the scope and the size of this thing just balloons and balloons and balloons. And Mary Justin and I both worked on projects that sometimes games don't even come out because the creep gets so bad, or they ship broken, or they're just a scattered mess. So yeah, we're trying to be really disciplined that way, but not chuck out
It's
good ideas.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because we both get excited and go, "This is a really good idea," and that is how a simple ditty for the ending of the Bossfight web series became a 4-character Stephen Sondheim musical style ending.
Okay, but even that was, I want to say 3 weeks. It might have been more like 5 from concept to finish.
Yeah, something like 5.
It didn't sprawl on for months, so it was, if we can do it in 5 weeks, fantastic. If we can't, we'll go back to basically Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or something like that. We kind of push each other in that regard. Mary just pushes me more than I push him, I think, in that regard. Yeah, I've been a producer for my entire media career, and so it's kind of drilled into me that I'm the person who goes, no, we can't do it now. I'm okay being the meanie. I'm okay with that, because you don't want to burn out your staff, right? Everybody wants to make a really cool game. The nice thing about using retro graphics is your system resources are really forgiving because of the style we chose. The animation is a challenge because everything has to be, frame by frame. It's frame animation. That's the work there. But once that's all down, we're good. It's not going to be this massive, you need a a 3000 series NVIDIA graphics card to run it.
Yes, and pixel art ages so well.
Yes.
When you look
scales so well too.
It scales so well too. I mean, if you look at some of the early PlayStation games, when you had the incredibly polygonal people, versus say some of the golden age of adventure games, the Quest for Glory games, or the LucasArts games, that pixel art still looks gorgeous. Whereas the games in the PlayStation era and the Nintendo 64 were great, but then you look back and go, "Oh boy, those polygons did not age well at all. What is going on with
Right.
her face?"
Yeah, especially on cathode ray tube TVs. I have to say cathode ray tube now because CRT is something different, and I feel
Oh, yeah.
scared.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yes.
just got it.
Yeah. I say
I did-
CRT TV, and people are like, "What?"
I did get Robert saying it gives them Zeboid Cthulhu Saves Christmas vibes. And then I got a question. Can you get some feature creepers as enemies?
I'm going to write that down.
Yes.
Feature creepers. There's a place in the game that would make sense.
Yes, I know exactly where.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about the characters. I mean, I know, I guess a lot of some of this is already going to be well known, but let's go in like we don't know anything about these characters.
Right. Somebody in chat asked what's the motivation for the
Mhm.
characters. This is a game where it's about good guys win. It's about friendship and kindness and that stuff. However, the twist for us in terms of morality, and I will not go down the rabbit hole into discussing how video game morality has barely changed since Ultima 4. But the twist is that what's considered good and kind to a sheltered fairy tale princess is not going to be the same as a succubus, is not going to be the same as an ancient warrior, is not going to be the same as a wolfman from space, right? So it's an examination of, in a very fun way, different ways to be good and how they can have overlap, how they can conflict at times. I mean, obviously, what a succubus thinks is good is not going to be the classic D&D priest of helm lawful good alignment. So that I'm really looking forward to sharing that element, because that's been an issue I've had with fantasy games for so very, very long.
Mhm.
I like that, like the subjectivity of being good and being kind and what it means to different people, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and obviously there are certain things. Don't be cruel. Like, don't be knowingly cruel. Right?
Right.
Right.
There are certain things that we recognize. Yeah, that's just bad. If you are mean, and you know you're being mean and you're deliberately being a jerk, that is not cool. Now there are some very, very snarky characters in the game, but Mouse, the Catman in the game, snarks for people's best interests. He cares. Therefore he scratches sometimes.
He's
And
kind of a
also,
benevolent Paul Lind.
yeah, he's sort of we when we talk about in writing, we separate Armand, the space wolf, is a big bushy waggy tail, and Mouse is a flicky tail, in terms of dialogue and reactions to things. But you also get into people's backgrounds and traumas and what happened to them, and the whole golden rule is a very subjective thing, that do unto others as you would have done unto you. Um, Obviously that's very different for different people based on where they come from, right? And one thing that's super great, somebody would consider incredibly considerate to one person, is get out of my space, you're smothering me, to someone else.
Mhm.
And we really want to explore that. What's the point of a role-playing game if you can't role play? It's not just battle level grinding. There's actually got to be some story, and that's where the adventure game elements come into it. There's a lot of places that you don't have to do the battles. You can do puzzles or a social solution or something like that instead, because one of the things some people don't like about JRPG style games is the combat grinding. So there's going to be options.
I love it. I like it a lot. This is a perfect comment. Song, I believe, Song W. Easton. It's almost like our backgrounds influence our personalities. You can't separate them. That's exactly right. And that's exactly kind of what it seems like you mean when it comes to the different type of characters and how you're going to develop them or how they've already been developed. Now, how many different characters are you having in the game? Now, I'm not talking NPCs, I mean main characters.
10 playable characters in parties of 4.
Okay.
But then characters from Bossfight like Anne Reardon, Shao Kind, Rohul Henchman, I'm forgetting some others, but they're the Sorcerer Zarkazan, they're going to be shopkeeps and other characters in the game as well. But the characters you see on the crowdfunding page, that's the 10 playable characters. We pick them for play style as much as anything else. When you look at them, you can kind of see, yeah, okay, I kind of see how that character would play. We wanted some variety in that regard, but we also wanted a bunch of personalities as well.
Right.
Not just, hey, this person hits really hard and this person uses pew pew bow and arrow, right? We wanted to also create characters that I think Mouse, sorry, Mary Just, Mouse is the game character. I'm looking at the cat. I think we kind of went anti-BioWare in that BioWare characters tend to start as cliches and go, kind of peel back like an onion, whereas we more went, yes, the fairy tale princess thing, but let's challenge the cliche right off the bat. So let's have the mixed race guy be the nobleman who uses a bow and arrow, right? Let's have the warrior guy be the sidekick and come at things sideways. Let's make the cutesy poo unicorn huck poo at people and immediately challenge those tropes instead of saying the trope is inherently bad. And I know I'm
Right.
going into a little bit of dicey territory there, but we all love fairy tale tropes, right? I
Right.
mean, everybody grows up. There's a Disney song you love. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody has one Disney song, likely more
3.
than one, or
Or
all the Disney
10.
songs. Yeah, or a few dozen.
75.
There you go. Probably more. We all love that stuff, right?
I mean, Mary Poppins basically turned me into an opera singer. But
oh, there you go. And
That's
I mean,
funny because I love Sleeping Beauty because the singer who plays Aurora is an opera singer.
yes,
well, that'd be prepared in the chat. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got something, and we don't want to go, oh no, we're reinventing the wheel. And I think we're also both kind of sick of the grimdark,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
oh God, yes, I'm so tired of that.
We're both big Terry Pratchett fans.
Yes,
The name of Princess Sparklemuffin's nanny should be a dead giveaway for that. It's a risque. It's Nanny Netherwax instead of Granny Weatherwax. But we're we're big fans of Terry Pratchett, and the wonderful thing about Terry Pratchett is it was such scathing social commentary in this wonderful, bubbly, colorful, friendly veneer.
and he also this is the thing that I like the most about Terry Pratchett, and a lot of people who dismiss him fail to notice. Terry Pratchett had the ability to create satire and to create commentary, but at the very end of the day, he was very much a benevolent figure. Even when he is pointing out the foibles of his characters, there is always an element, even if the character is an absolute horrible person, there is, for example, he will have an element as a narrator of sadness that this person went this way. And if when you have characters who are midway, you know that they're flawed characters, they're doing some wrong things, but they want to do better, there's this element of compassion towards them, which is something that Granny Weatherwax has, even if she doesn't outwardly show it. And that's another thing we wanted to tack on, because we had the spectrum of being a jerk, being a mean, all of the things, but we also are looking into something that Terry Pratchett and to a point Stephen Sondheim pointed out, that being nice is different from being good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously Bossfight went right to the heart of that. The evil criminal organization was called Nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Noise.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, nice is just telling people what they want to hear, right? And that's
Yes.
not always the good thing to do. That's not always the kind thing to do. And yeah, I mean, someone mentioned solemnity in the chat, and that's a very interesting choice of words, and that's really good feedback. That's part of the cool things we've done doing these streams, is we get feedback right now of what people want. And that's really useful. Yeah, there it is. And
Yeah.
I definitely think there's some of that in this. I mean, I think Mary just discovered Biff the understudy from the Baldur's Gate games recently, and I was like, "What?" I played through the original Baldur's Gate so many times, and then I played through Baldur's Gate 2 so many times, and what's so inspiring about those games is they were only partially voiced, and no cinematic cutscenes, nothing. It was just picking moments, and there were moments that were incredibly touching. How familiar are you guys with the series with the different playable characters? There's this one elf named Aerie. She's a winged elf, fairly obscure subclass, but yeah, she got her wings cut off. And this is way before Lucifer, the TV show, did it. But she had her wings cut off, and it was this whole thing of dealing with the idea that she's this winged elf who's grounded, and I had to kind of find a way forward. And it's all voice acting in a portrait. And it's one of those things you realize after playing the game for the fourth time, these portraits don't move, but I believe it. I'm seeing facial expressions that aren't there in these portraits, right? and there's a real art to a good portrait, which is why we're doing the little character studies that we're releasing on Twitter and the Facebook group and stuff like that. And that's another thing about the chat one kind of like really popped on the whole grimdark thing. And the issue with grimdark for me, and I wonder if Mary just agrees, and I wonder if, Tristan and Bianca agree, it's not so much that there's an issue with going dark. I love my gritty stuff. The problem is if you do it wrong, there's nowhere to go. You need light and shadow. You need color and contrast.
Chiaroscuro.
There you
Yeah.
go. And if you don't have the light, you can't have the dark mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It's
Yeah.
it's one of
Yeah.
the one of my favorite principles in opera. A very well done opera will have the tragedy be cathartic because there will be at least some element of hope in it, as opposed to, well, Wagner is exhausting, so I'm not going to bring him up. I mean, if you can last through one Wagner opera, you deserve a medal. But but for example, if you look at Tosca, for example, even though it's a story about authoritarianism and corruption, but at the very end, you have this woman Tosca, an opera singer, who stabs the man who killed her boyfriend to death, and she goes, before him trembled all of Rome, davanti lui tremava tutta Roma. And then she gets chased by the by the guards, because they've just discovered the body. And she has this majestic moment when she just stands on the parapet and turns back to them and goes, Scarpia davanti Deo. It's like, Scarpia, I will see you before God. Then she turns and she jumps off the parapet into the abyss to her death, because she will not be taken alive. She will die on her own terms. And she absolutely defied everybody and just left a mess behind her, and she doesn't care. And you, of course, the audience is in tears, but they go, good for you, girl. Good for you.
Right? I actually do have a question for you from Incubus. So is it going to be like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, only super girly with Pegasus, Unicorn, Fairy, Amazons, and Mermaid as character classes with Shrek-esque double entendres?
If the super girly elements come from Mary Jest, I struggle with super girly. That was sort of the funny thing of me going. Princess Sparklemuffin was supposed to be a one-off character that was created to be annoying as a foil for the character I super loved, which was the Evil Queen in Lady Bits episode 12, the previous series I did to Bossfight. But people love this Princess Peach pastiche. And so I'm like, all right, we'll run with this. My heart is still with the Evil Queen. We're going to get to that. But okay, there's this thing in video games of people saying, we want to see the damsel in distress rescue herself, right? But then you get into what that means. And the cheap out tends to be she inexplicably learns to fight and becomes some sort of ass kicker, right? Instead of figuring out how to make a fairy tale princess who sings songs and befriends animals and is just really, really nice and kind and sweet to everybody, make that interesting and make that its own form of heroism. And that's where the idea came from. And that was where the idea of making Princess Sparklemuffin as the main character, the party healer, came from. That's a bit of my my D&D background as well. I like playing healers. It's in tabletop you can reward healers, but playing World of Warcraft, healers got shaft in terms of XP, right? You're keeping the party on the feet, but you don't get XP for that. And I'm like, power to clerics, man. Let's make this interesting. Let's separate the religiosity from the healing factor. and create a main character. Because let's face it, when you're picking your character loadout, I know I'm jumping all over the place because this is kind of a deep dive in terms of design, but when you're picking your character loadout in a 4 to 6 character roster, you have to have fighter, mage, rogue, cleric, right? Because you need a complete party. So you end up picking characters based on what you need them to do in battle instead of it being fun. So we gave the player more real choice by going, okay, you're going to have a healer in your party no matter what you do. So now you can just pick the characters you like to play instead of needing a healer. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It goes back. Robert saying, in my opinion, part of why the love for her is because it goes back to your original argument with Anita about damsel in distress, and it personifies things. Do you think that has a lot to do with it?
I think people maybe it's really tough to talk about why Mary just might be better talking about this because it's really hard to talk about why characters like a character I created. I'm surprised whenever anyone connects. I was sure I was going to get canceled off the planet and then canceled off of Mars and then canceled out of the universe, and I would have to become some female version of Dr. Manhattan making things on a distant universe for making a trans man sidekick warrior. I was sure people on all sides were just going to freak the fuck out at that character, but people freaking love Solomon.
Well,
And
it's because he has that the thing. I think the reason people love your characters is that, sure, prima facie, when they look at the picture, they'll go, "Oh, this is a stereotype," but they're not. Like you say, you don't. You go ahead and make them interesting. You give them a reason for being. They're not just, the princess. They're not just a sidekick. They have, like, social justice story. Of course, his backstory has elements of hilarity, like the Golden Girls and Nana Muscuri CDs. I can identify. But it also has all of that story about being gaslit, about being used, about being used by someone as a tool instead of an end in itself, as a means to an end, and then feeling left as an outcast, feeling rejected. And in many ways, that was kind of incubating there from the first appearances of the social justice warrior, and people kind of see that there is something in how you portray these characters that telegraphs, there is a lot more under the surface, and we're going to get to see that. And so, and we're going to get to see that in the game too. Now you have more than just, the 27, 37 minutes to tell a story. Now we've got the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, God, how our game that where these stories can be told at length, and the player can have an input in how some of these stories resolve.
Yeah, that's the part I'm excited out of extrapolating from the boss fight voter choice thing, letting people have their own individualized experiences. So if they really want to see that different arc, they can. And I think the challenge is going to be there, making the characters stay true to who they are, but providing some branching. And then I don't know about you guys, but with me in RPGs, I much prefer sort of the Yakuza style open world thing of not every encounter you have is bracing and life changing. Yes. Sometimes they're just funny things that happened. So we've sort of embraced that of not everything is going to change the arc of the character's destiny. Some stuff's just going to be really fun and you can horribly fail out of it and still win. Right?
And you have the tiers where people can actually write stories, right?
Yeah, those are gone.
Okay, those are gone. I'm sorry.
No, but those we knew those would go quick. There is an opportunity for people to be a quest giver NPC, meaning they actually get a portrait instead of just the
dialogue,
the avatar, and they get some dialogue, and they actually get to go, I want a quest that does this, right? And we'll go and make it with some involvement for them. We limited the number of writers more than Bossfight because there's only so many people I want walking around with spoiler lore, right?
Right.
For obvious reasons, everybody's going to have to sign an NDA on that one because there are going to be times where they're going to write something and we're like, no, you can't do that because it's not released to the public, right? So, yeah, there's that. People can even, if they got the money, design their own sub boss for the game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about next. So what is that?
Well, there are parts in the game where we've sort of designed this dungeon and go, we want a sub boss here. What is it? So let's just open it up to people, because let's face it, some of those mid-dungeon bosses are the best ones are kind of anachronistic and weird and come out of nowhere, and it's just a moment, and then it's done. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was sort of the inspiration for that for me.
Yes. Oh,
you
gosh.
know that 4-character, I'm really dating myself here, 4-character side scroller beat 'em up Turtles game. The one you got to play is that you could pick your turtle, and yeah, and I was always Donatello or Leonardo because that's
Donatello had the best reach.
He did, but he was kind of slow. I went back and forth. I'm not good at picking a single main, except for Horny on Main, the base camp in Saga Sparklemuffin. That is the base camp. It is a bar run by Beelzebub, so it has a devil lady doing a little can, and it's called Horny on Main. The full name is Horny on Main Entertainment, short form for home. I thought that was very clever. But the first time I encountered, was it Bebop? Or was it Rocksteady and Bebop, a duel fight? It was just, I was kind of aware of Ninja Turtles, and I'd read the comics and I'd seen the show, but something about Rocksteady and Bebop being bosses, it just made me realize how totally messed up those characters are in such a cool way. And they don't do very much except be a couple of guys the turtles can beat up and you don't feel bad because they're kind of bullies, right? They're also a boar and a rhinoceros, which is awesome, right? But it doesn't have the menace of Shredder or the curse you stuff with Krang, but they're just cool. And that was the idea of, I don't care how anachronistic these sub bosses are. If one person has always thought this would be really cool to have in a game, I think if one person thought that, somebody else is going to think that. And a lot of other people are going to think that. And part of making a game about friendship and kindness is to bring in other people and kind of give them hugs through the game design process. And if somebody can feel validated by having that character they always wanted to see in a game, that's awesome. That's what gaming's about, right? Like those experiences that don't necessarily make sense. Why were they Onion Knights in Final Fantasy 3? Why does Kojima do half the Kojimas? We can speculate. We don't care, right? That's something I think I find has been lost in the West, right? Just putting things in because they're cool, has been lost.
Yeah, if you look at, things like the Quest for Glory games had a lot of anachronistic humor. And you didn't go, well, that breaks the setting. No, it's like, oh, that was funny. Or even when you go through some Final Fantasy bosses and you have a case where you're suplexing a railroad.
Or things like, well, you can't do this anymore, but the Batmobile suddenly drives out of a cave in the original King's Quest.
Yes.
Okay. Just things sort of happen because
no, that was Ultima. That was an Ultima.
There was one in King's Quest as well.
Oh, I missed it.
The bird's cave. Every so often, the Batmobile, you heard do 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 do, and this Batmobile just drove out. You could do that and not get sued in the 80s in video games because everything was mail order on floppy disks.
Yeah.
but even in Quest for Glory 3, they had a Sanford and Son homage in the junk dealers in the market.
And in one of the Space Quest games, you had ZZ Top.
Yes, and in Leisure Suit Larry, there was a reference to most other Sierra games. That one death, were you in like the Sierra Death Workshop kind of thing? And did those like fourth wall break? Did it break theme? Sure. Did anybody care? Oh, 95% of people here don't know adventure games.
I was just gonna show you that.
This is why we're here to because this is the issue. An adventure game now is more people are familiar with Japanese adventure games, which we consider visual novels.
Right.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. We get into a terminology issue here because visual novels and adventure games are not the same in Japan, but ignorant Westerners mix them up all the time, right? But
all the time.
Yeah, but back in the day, there were these simple puzzle-driven stories where you actually like moved around and
manipulated inventory.
Yeah, explored environments, stuff like that. A lot of that stuff got bundled into RPGs. And we're sort of pulling back out those adventure elements. The adventure game genre got absorbed into action adventure and then action RPG with a side of other kind of RPG. And so there are elements of it, but we want to sort of distill that experience that as like Heo said in chat, the original Legend of Zelda was almost like a flex point where the two things kind of merged.
Yeah,
I think.
And you had the Quest for Glory games, all 5 of them, blended action RPG and adventure, because you had the adventure game sections where you had to solve puzzles, etc. Then you had combat, and then you also had stat racing for your class, because you had 3 classes, 4 later on in the game, where the approach to solving each puzzle was different depending on what class you had. If you were a thief, then of course you had to solve puzzles through stealth, but the fighter would probably just bash through, etc. And the whole concept of the adventure game as the point and click adventure game is that you're in a world with a setting and there's a challenge, and 99% of the time the way through that challenge is not violence. You have to either the characters are the puzzles, and you have to figure out the characters, and you've got to find a way to manipulate the situation to get to the next section, or you have to or there you have a literal puzzle where you have something in the environment, etc., that needs to be manipulated to go through. Grim Fandango, for example, is one of the best adventure games ever. Loom is a beautiful adventure game where you use music to manipulate things. And then of course you have Monkey Island, which is like, I think, is the pinnacle of humor adventure. And we are drawing from Monkey Island a lot because God, that game series was funny, at least the first 2.
Yeah. And player tastes have changed so much since the 90s that what it means to make an adventure game is now completely different, because you have to manage frustration tolerance, and nobody's going to accept a soft lock anymore, right? People are like, what's a soft lock? A soft lock is just you get stuck and you don't know why, and you can't finish the game. You basically have to restore a past save or start all over again. This was people's idea of fun in the early to mid 90s. You can't do that today, right?
Nowadays you have to have, and I think in many ways it's a better design philosophy. The early Sierra games, the King's Quest games, and the early Space Quest games kind of made it a funny thing that you would die, so you could see the different ways that you could die and get the error messages. But what many people don't realize is that they were breaking new ground. Roberta Williams is in many ways the mother of graphic adventures and graphic players, graphic games. And so they didn't have rules, they didn't have best practices. They were figuring this out as they went along, and of course a lot of their experiences of games as a concept were tied to the arcade. You just had a set number of lives, and you died. You could, trial and error. As the industry progressed, and you went on to older, more mature design philosophies, you had LucasArts, who went, let's not punish the player with multiple deaths. Let's make it so that you can't die in this game, in our games, but let's try to create puzzles that are intuitive. And if you think about it just a little bit, you can figure out the way around that. Of course, later on, you had issues where some adventure games just vanished up their own butts with incredibly complex puzzles, like the Gabriel Knight 3
Oh,
passport
yeah.
puzzle. And so, in many ways, that was the first death of adventure games, because they came back later. They came back in force in the 2000s. And if you see the things like, for example, Dave Gilbert is doing with the Watch It Eye games.
Shout out to Dave. Yeah.
Yes. The Blackwell Chronicles games, the Unavowed games, they have puzzles in them, but they're woven into the story and woven into the character. So you really know how you're going to get through them. You just have to figure out the steps, etc., and you get a very rewarding experience. But we have to remember that we wouldn't be at that point. Like Dave wouldn't be at that point if Sierra hadn't laid the groundwork with all of the mistakes and all of their successes.
Yeah. And people have not played them.
Yeah. And you can find most of them on GOG.com for dirt cheap, as well as the Ultima games. The Ultima games are a cornerstone of role-playing history. Richard Garriott, Ultima 4 is one of the most influential games in the role-playing and the entire role-playing spectrum. And unfortunately, companies have not picked up on the notion of the ethical choice. They have simplified it and kind of made it a bit of a surface thing,
Paragon Renegade,
like BioWare does. But there are a lot of interesting questions to be asked about, what is actually virtue, what is what is ethical behavior, how does that differ from people to people, etc. Those are questions that have not been asked or really taken up since Ultima 4. People like Scorpia, one of the early game journalists, and she was a woman, and she was a superstar game journalist back in the 90s and 80s. She saw Ultima 4 and said, this has great potential. This is going to change the industry. And it changed the industry. The industry has just not changed enough. It has not taken up all of the potential ideas that can be explored from that. So, look, guys and girls, go to GOG.com, look up the Ultima games, look up the LucasArts adventure games, look at the Sierra games. Those are foundational games in the industry history, and many of them are super playable still today.
The funny thing is, you're talking about this, and I'm like, I feel like uncultured swine. I don't know half the games they're talking. I'm like, I heard BioShock. Okay, we're good. I know what we're talking about now.
Well, see, that's
so
the
bad.
thing is, we want to make a game so that people understand these concepts without having to go back and replay dozens and dozens and dozens of adventure games, right? We want to bring back that experience, but have it be modern expectations. Because I can go on at length at how brilliant what Ultima 4 did was what Richard Garriott was trying to do, or now Richard Garriott Takayu. Dude is so cool. He took his wife's last name when he got married. But he basically wanted to solve the problem where in Ultima 3, players just went running through, pillaging farms, killing all the NPCs, and there was no reason not to. You kill people and take their stuff. What's wrong with that? Right. And so Richard Garriott came up with this really elaborate additive moral virtue system that gaming really hasn't moved past since. The idea of he didn't go straight up Judeo-Christian cardinal virtues. He kind of came up with his own combos. Unfortunately, when Dragon Age Origins and certain BioWare games tried to pick up on that, they found their completion rates tank in their player base they got acquired by EA. EA said you can't do that anymore, and so we have the dialogue wheel where it's just Paragon, Renegade. There's a little heart when you flirt. There's a little brain when you're going to say something thoughtful, and I don't find myself engaging with those games the minute I know what I'm going to be smart here. Oh, I'm going to be snarky here. I'm going to be, I'm going to flirt here. The sexual harassment in later BioWare games is really bad. You go back and
Yeah.
you're playing as everybody's boss, and it's like, hey, you want to hit it? Like,
Oh gosh,
that was pre Me Too.
that is why I just loved how Saints Row just took the piss out of that.
Yeah, that's a great series too, Saints Row.
Oh yeah. So how did you two end up working together?
The working together question. It was sort of, I think we have a similar mentality about things, and then incredibly complementary skill sets. So it's that sort of thing. And we joke that we're basically the Lutece twins from BioShock Infinite. I'm Rosalind, he's Robert. He's like,
Yes.
let's do the thing. And I'm like, hold on. Birder cage, it doesn't matter. But I like the cage. There's some of that. There's some of work style is really, really important in this business. People can be absolutely brilliant, but not have the same process. And so it's an absolute disaster, and they end up hating each other.
Right.
We have complementary enough work styles. It's a bit of a challenge to add new people because we are so okay, let's go and do it. We do things so fast. We've had to sort of slow down and again contain scope so we can do things in a smaller team. If this game goes well, we'll have to learn to manage people. But yeah, I think that it just sort of happened. I was doing things and I said to Mary just, hey, we could use this. Do you want to do it? He's like, okay. I think that's just pretty much what happened. It was kind of jazz.
Yeah, the first thing that we ever did together, it was me writing a musical number for Bossfight. And then
we did the Sims parody before that.
Oh yes, we did the Sims parody. That's
yeah,
true. We did the prayer, the Sarah Brightman and the guy Bocelli.
Celine Dion. It had to be Celine
Dion. That's right, Celine Dion.
We go. That horribly cheesy song.
Yes.
Everybody likes I don't care who you say.
And Liana wrote lyrics for her in English and for me in Simlish.
Instead of the Italian. And we did it at the end of Lady Bits because I beat the piss out of the Sims over and over and over and over and over again. And I wanted people to know it's just in good fun. Right? And so we did this little Sims parody, and Mary just went through and actually he made little avatars in the Sims and did a little video.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That was the first thing we did together. I was way out of my comfort zone on that. Being Canadian and singing Celine Dion in public is
oh no.
Yeah, there's so many reasons why you don't, but I'm a huge Steve Martin fan, and he writes in his autobiography Born Standing Up that he overcame those sort of inner barriers for him where it's like, I can't play an instrument, but I can play an instrument funny. I can't sing, but I can sing funny, right? And I took that. I don't have to be Celine Dion. I just have to get close enough to it to give people a laugh, right? And that I had a terrifying phobia of singing in public for years and years and years.
Oh no!
Because of something that happened back in school. But that kind of got me over it. And now, if you've seen Bossfight, you wouldn't know, but I kind of crap my pants every time I realize what I'm about to do. Because the other thing that's funny about Bossfight is I'm singing lead out of my range. My natural range is Anne Reardon's, not Princess Sparklemuffin's.
Yeah,
Princess
she's a
Sparklemuffin is,
mezzo.
oh, it's such murder. But it sounds cute at the end of it.
I actually got a pretty interesting question. So, what is better, making or playing the games?
That's like asking
Oh.
what's better, making food or eating food.
That's true.
I can't say. I mean, I love the creative process, but I also love seeing what other people are doing. And when it's good, it's amazing. And then you go, I want to make something awesome too. I want to express. I want to create crazy things. So I would say it's a dependent cycle for me.
It's funny. I went for a similar metaphor, but mine was what's better, sleep or sex? It
We go for
depends.
food or sex.
Like how tired are you, right? Like playing a game that you feel really understands you, rejuvenates you, and makes you feel refreshed, right? But you know, taking more of a risk, and that to me, sex is good when it's vulnerable. Um, and so making games is very vulnerable because you're putting a lot of yourself out there, right? And then asking people, hey, fuck around with these characters we spent years making, right? They are different. I think that making games has given me a deeper and greater appreciation for what other people do when I play games, especially in the AAA space. AAA
Mhm.
games get so much crap, but those games, those Ubisoft, you can make any game you want as long as it's an open world game with RPG elements. Those are still solid. Those are hard to make.
Mhm.
I don't know that I'd want to make a game like that just because they are a lot of moving parts, right? You're talking about a massive, galleon with a crew of dozens instead of a cool little, schooner that you can zip in and out. You get this
Mhm.
little, and totally different things. But the more game dev jobs I do, the more I go back and play a game somebody else has made and just marvel at the stuff that they managed to pull off, because you realize how hard it is.
It's like opera. Opera is a succession of things that somehow manage to fail to go wrong. Um,
Or sometimes do.
or sometimes do, as someone who has actually lost his pants in the middle of the scene,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
or had to rescue a friend who was sliding into the pit because the paint job was too slick. Uh,
Yeah.
but yes, it's true. I mean, when you look at some of these old games, like there's a game that I guarantee no one here has played, which is called The Adventures of Robin Hood, and it was not the NES game. It was a DOS game that came out in the 90s. It was in the same style. The graphic style is Populous, but it was an open world game, like one of the first real open world games where there was no set storyline. You essentially were playing Robin Hood, and what happened was up to you. You could accidentally, which I did, murder Will Scarlet by shooting your bow at the wrong time. At one point, I was trying to kill the Sheriff of Nottingham, and I ended up nailing Maid Marian right between the eyes. Um, it was just, and of course, the game reacted, and then if you killed Maid Marian, then of course the townspeople lynch you, and that's the end of the story. Or Ultima 7, which has so many moving parts, but the interesting part of all of that is that you're targeting things like emergent story, emergent play,
Mhm.
things that are not intended by the game developer, but the mechanics of the gameplay make it possible. Like there's an old Atari ST game called Sundog Frozen Legacy, which was an amazing game that has been completely obscured. Um, there's a remake called Sundog Resurrection. You can look it up. It's actually quite good. I'm one of the beta testers for that. But for example, they had set up this entire spacefaring economy. The concept of that game is that you were a mine worker whose rich uncle has just passed away, and he's giving you the Sundog, which is his ship, which is a piece of crap and is falling apart, but is your ticket to freedom. And you have to fulfill several contracts, etc. And one of the problems in the game is that anytime you do a trading contract, when you put cargo, valuable cargo in your ship's hold and you go into space, you immediately get detected by space pirates who try to blast the hell out of you. And early in the game, when you have like really low quality gear, you might survive, but like parts of your ship are falling apart and you have to spend more money into fixing it, etc. So that was the challenge. And then someone realized, the worlds have different technology levels. Like the world when you start is it's a med tech level, but there's a very high tech world that is within the first jump reach. If you go there and you stockpile a whole bunch of spare parts in your ship's cargo, in your ship's hold, they don't get detected as cargo by the pirates. So you can go to a high-tech world, then go to a low-tech world, sell off all of those spare parts, and you start making money like crazy. And when the game designer heard about this, they asked him, well, you're going to patch that? And it's like, no, that's a perfect workaround. That is an excellent idea. And the game mechanics allow for it. So why should I patch it out?
I actually have a question, another one from Robert. What is your opinion on if it is your choices matter type games, right? Are they actually possible, or are they reduced mostly to selling points?
You realize you're asking to like philosophy junkies to talk about choice and meaning of choice. Oh, this is get drinks, everybody. Mary Jess, do you want to go first, or should I tee up?
Well, I'll go first, and then you can go. Well,
right.
I do think they're possible, but here's the thing. Actually, I was talking about this with my husband the other day because we were talking about our game idea, which Liana likes, but I'm not going to talk about it exactly because we want it to be a surprise. We haven't announced it yet. It's going to be, of course, a couple of years because it'll have to happen after Bossfight. But he was talking about the concept of choice in games, and there is a programmer, legendary game designer, Chris Crawford, who talks a lot about interactive storytelling. And we really like what he has to say, but there is a problem that we have with his ideas. For him, the notion of interactive storytelling dovetails with emergent gameplay. For him, for a story to be fully interactive, it needs to have no pre-written story, no pre-written plot points. And we thought, that does not create a satisfying experience because, one, we are not at the point of technology where we can create a system and the computer can create a meaningful interaction with the trappings of human interaction. You might get a mechanical a scene being played out mechanically, but the computer, the AIs do not have the finesse to write, to handle language, to handle emotions. And so we thought, this is where we go back to the issue of your choice matter. Does your choice really matter? Does it not? Well, the idea is, some people have the idea that if you have a truly open world with nothing but emergent play, then you have absolute freedom of choice. There's a problem there, though. The first thing is that most people experience choice paralysis. When you are faced with an NPC and you have a system where you can say absolutely anything to that NPC, you don't know what to say, because there has been no contextual constraining. And here's the thing, and this goes back to discussions of what is freedom, etc. Freedom as an abstraction, people go, oh, it's great, like ABBA said in their most recent song, there are no memorable odes to freedom. And the reason is that freedom needs to have a context. Choice needs to have a context. So you have to have a certain level of constraint for these choices to mean something. You need to have a cost, you need to have a consequence. And so when you look at the overall story, you have to design. If you want to have a design where your choice actually matters, you have several approaches. You can have a game that will probably take you 10 years to finish, where you can factor in several different choice points and their ramifications. And so of course, it'll be incredibly expensive to implement unless you're going for, a low-level adventure game, etc. But there's also another solution. You can have a level of choice that is different enough, that gives you a different enough experience, that there is a significant impact on the gameplay, on the story, on the characters. Of course, the problem there is, how different do you want to make it? That still goes into how expensive that is going to be on the side of game development. So you can have a game. It's surprisingly, you can have a game where your choices do matter, even within a small scope. I encourage people. There's another thing I adore is interactive fiction. The textile games from the Infocom era, but the genre has remained alive. It is constantly being produced. There's yearly competitions. One of the greatest interactive fiction writers is Emily Short, and she wrote a very short. It's a one-room interactive fiction piece called Galatea, which is kind of a callback to the Pygmalion Galatea myth. You are in an exhibition room and there is this statue, but she's sentient and she can talk to you. And depending on how you interact with her and the things that you say to her, whether you encourage her or whatever, you have different endings. Like in one ending, she steps off the pedestal and she leaves with you because she wants to be free. So you have all of that in there that you can just pull off in one room. It is perfectly possible to extend that to have to the extent of a full game without having feature creep, without having an overarching monster that just collapses on itself with its own weight. It's just very difficult, and it takes a very, very good design mind and probably a shit ton of charts to pull it off.
Yeah, and then expect, when you go through the review process to have the people reviewing games not understand what you're doing. And that sort of, there's a big difference between most people who review games are like, I'm a writer, because they write reviews or they make videos. They're language driven. And that's when you get into, what do you mean by choice? Mary just suffers through me doing this all the time. This is what I was thinking. He just went this and Pygmalion and Galatea and all that stuff. And I'm like, what do you mean by choice? And what do you mean by matter? Right? Because choice, there are two types of choice in a game, right? Reductively, there's narrative choice and then there's gameplay choices, right? Picking which weapon to use in a fight is a choice. This is what I love about the Far Cry games. I can storm a fort with a tiger buddy chucking meat so that the tiger eats the guy. I can use a rocket launcher. I can go in loud. I can go in quiet. But when people review the games, the story's very linear. Yes, because the choices aren't in the narrative. They're in the gameplay. Those are still choices, right? You get into narrative choice, then you're into branching story. That's what most people see as choices matter. But that's not the only type of choice that matters. If you want truly emergent choice, then it has to be all gameplay, because there's no narrative. It can't possibly be. You've got an infinite number of choices. It's the monkeys on the typewriters, right? But then even within narrative choices, you have to decide, and there's two competing irreconcilable philosophies in game design. There is no right or wrong here. There's one team that believes that choices must have consequences to matter. So there must be cause and effect. Otherwise, it's just sort of existentialist claptrap and sophistry and solipsism, and it doesn't mean anything, right? And then you've got other people who claim if there are consequences, then all you're doing is min-maxing. You're not actually making a choice based on a truly interactive experience, because a truly interactive experience is all about how you feel about what happens. One is very kind of German philosophical, one is very French, which is what happened with the original Watch Dogs, and why they decided to make a game that was all about how you feel about this flat affect main character. Good for them. They tried it. It didn't work in terms of audience response. But the problem with the whole meaningful choice question is obviously, game devs will talk and talk and talk and talk about it, but there's really no answer because there are numerous answers, but it's hard to get a satisfying response to the question because the question is so ephemeral and so difficult to grasp. Yeah, just because you have choice doesn't mean you have control. Just because you have autonomy doesn't mean you have agency, and so on and so forth. And so you cannot possibly please everybody all of the time, and that's where the design comes in. You have to make a very clear decision very early on in your process. What kind of choices are we going to have matter? I mean, in BioShock, the design philosophy is very much, well, if there's a clear advantage to harvesting the little sisters or saving the little sisters, if there's a clear difference between the bird and the cage, then it's not really a choice, it's a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what BioShock comes down on. Obviously, BioWare games take a very, very, very different approach to the whole thing with the multiple endings. And I think that I go back to the Yakuza series. I think they kind of do a really cool thing in that some choices do matter in terms of, your real estate empire or some of the things that you do within the game that can get you really cool weapons or really cool items, make those later fights much, much easier. But then there are other things that just kind of happen, and the meaning, what matters is that experience, right? When you go into the cabaret mini games and you talk to these hostess girls and you find out all their little personalities and their quirks and you see their stories, you don't get very much tangible out of that. I would fight to the death that those experiences matter, because you've got these really cute Asian hostess ladies with personalities who are individuals, and you have to figure out what they like and what they don't like, and that's very meaningful in our discourse now, right? So that was an incredibly long non-answer, and I apologize for that, but sometimes the most truthful answers are a repurposing of the question.
Yeah, I like it. It's so funny when you guys talk about this because I'm a normie gamer, I guess is the best way to put it. So thinking about these things, I'm like, well, in Detroit Become Human, I died a lot of times. Like, and like just thinking about the games that I haven't ever explored because I've never heard of half of these. Like, there's a lot of what you've mentioned I haven't even, like, obviously I love BioShock. I love some of those games, but those are AAA games. I've never really dug a whole lot deeper unless you're talking Undertale or something. And that kind of was a phenomenon in itself. I've never really dug deeper when it comes to the gaming industry besides the AAA. And I think that's been a mistake all along.
I don't know. I'm not big on if we have inspired you to try some stuff off the beaten path. I do think you'd like the Unavowed games, the Watchdog games that
yes,
mentioned. Yeah. But if people just want to stick to what they're familiar with, I think that's great. People who only play the annual Call of Duty and the annual Madden and maybe, some NBA 2K or whatever, that's a gamer. People who are like us who play these nutty indie, what is this? You're doing what with who and how? I mean, we got way into a game that's a retelling of Hamlet from the point of view of Ophelia, only Ophelia is a black lady in it. What the heck was the name of that game, Mary Jess?
the Hamlet one, right? Elsinore.
Elsinore, that's right. It's called Elsinore, and it's a time loop. And the indie games are a deep well, and you basically sort of go through word of mouth and what you like, and if
Right.
you like this, you try other things. But people shouldn't feel like if they don't have the really nerdy deep dive lore dump knowledge that we do, because we do this stuff. That shouldn't make them feel less. That shouldn't make them feel second class. That shouldn't make them feel like they have less of a right to an opinion. I think that's part of the problem with the industry, is there's too much gatekeeping in that regard. If somebody picks up a Halo title and sees God, fantastic. I wonder about that God, but that's great. If somebody thinks, I'm trying to think of a game. There are people like Cyberpunk. They thought it was a heck of a time. Amazing, right? I hated The Last of Us 2. If people love The Last of Us 2,
I loved it.
see, if people love The Last of Us 2, that's good, because like I said about the choice answer, you cannot possibly get everybody in anything, because there's too many binary choices you have to make as a designer. And so it's the same thing with comic books, right?
Right.
Like, if people just read big 2 comics and they don't delve into some of the indie stuff, or they're not like me, who was obsessed with 90s Doom Patrol, and all of a sudden that's relevant instead of just friggin' weird. And it is not better or worse. Hobbies and pop culture stuff should not be, I don't believe they should be identities. I certainly don't believe they should be jobs. And unfortunately, at this point, there's just too much maintenance to be allowed to have an opinion on anything, and I certainly don't want to be games for that audience. If the game comes out and major game reviewers utterly loathe what we did, I will cheer. I will.
Oh, I do have a
something about-
question, actually. Aren't the, what's it called? Oh my gosh. Telltale games, are they considered oh my gosh, we were just talking about this.
Adventure games?
Adventure games.
Choose your
Yes, thank
adventure.
you.
That is a very interesting question, because we're gonna get super polarizing now without intending to be. 'Cause you have
Please
games
do.
like that. You have games like Life is Strange. You have games like Gone Home, and you get into the, it's not a game because there's no gameplay in it. It's like, of course there's gameplay. You are doing button inputs. There's no combat. There's very few puzzles, but there is gameplay. And this is where you start realizing that we work and play in an industry that is made up almost entirely of jargon. The categorization issue is so, I will say problematic. I never use that word, but in this case, it's not a problem, but it's a potential problem down the line. And again, I'll give you guys a binary branch, and then I'll throw it over to Mary Jess, because he'll have a much more poetic take on this than I would. I think you're seeing our different styles of thought, right? Like, he weaves a yarn, and I'm like system flowchart, right? A to B, B to C, split, if and clause. But there is genre in everything else: mystery, comedy, drama, gothic, right? Then there, in games, we have this other thing that people call genre that is actually ludo genre. It is the type of game, not the type of story. And I wish people would start calling them ludo genres, because then, fantasy genre, RPG, ludo genre. And they're not the same thing. And too many game genres are getting locked into a particular, like if it's an RPG, we must have puffy shirts and elves and dwarves, right? No, can we please get
Anachronox?
a noir detective RPG.
Mhm.
Or so they kind of tried with LA Noir, but it was more open world.
Disco Elysium.
Disco Elysium, yeah, there's a shining example. It had sort of magic realism elements to it, but yeah, there's a good example of something that sort of broke the mold. And that's why when we get into these classifications, these categories are supposed to be means of communication, not some sort of pass fail destiny thing. And
Mhm.
when you're pitching a game, when you're developing a game, this is something that's really painful, because if you can't do, a comedy driven JRPG style MMO with adventure game elements, people are like, what is your game? It's a game. It's this. Here's a demo, play the game. Right? But that's not how the gaming industry works, and I'd like the industry to unclench its sphincter a little bit, and that was a perfect Liana landing. Mary Jest, over to you to salvage the class of this discussion.
Try a little bit more flow, you mean?
To flow through. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm getting toilet humor again. Okay.
That's interesting. I do agree a lot with Leanna's response, because I remember back in the day, a lot of the early Sierra adventure games actually tried to mix it up. They tried to add arcade sequences to their games. Like, here's a great adventure game called Conquest of Camelot, which was
Except the arcade sequences are terrible.
yes, written by Christy Marks. You know her from the creator of Gem and the Holograms. She wrote scripts for the Ninja Turtles.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
she also wrote Amethyst in Gem World.
Mhm.
So she's a very accomplished game designer, screenwriter. So Christy made, I think, the best portrayal of the Arthurian cycle on any game so far. The game is wonderful. However, Sierra was experimenting. They were going, well, we don't want to be fully, fall fully into the adventure game bracket. We're going to add some arcade elements, some action elements, and there's one element where you have to kill boars wild boars that are attacking you. There's another one where you have to fight the Black Knight, and oh my god. There was one problem, and it's that Sierra kind of sucked at action implementation. So although the concept of these segments were interesting, the execution was kind of terrible. But that didn't discourage Sierra. They kept adding at it. I mean, the Quest for Glory games had combat. The first game, it started getting progressively better until you got to the Quest for Glory 4, where you had sliders, where you could control how your character fought and defended. So, it was much better. But, when you look at, say, an adventure game like Monkey Island, and you assume that is the trope designer for the entire genre. So you need to have silly puzzles, you need to have no death, you need to have no action sequences. Like Liana says, you're creating this framework that you're tying the type of story to the type of gameplay, and that's not necessarily the case. So, for example, some of the Telltale games, I played The Wolf Among Us, and I thought that
So
was
good.
brilliantly told story. Of course, later on, Telltale went down, the pot, but even those games had the quick time event moments where you had to react, or you would get killed, or someone else would get killed, or someone would yell at you, etc. The Walking Dead game also had elements of that by Telltale. So I would consider them adventure games, regardless of how the mechanical trappings of the game mechanics appear, because when we're talking about genres, you have the Ludo genres, which is, of course, how the game handles, etc. But you also have the type of story that's being told. So you can have an adventure story, and an adventure story focuses on exploration, meeting new people, fixing shit that's broken, and then ideally saving the day, potentially.
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
what you focus on in an adventure story, the exploration thing. Whether you do that through an action, through action elements, etc., that's not the core element to the story. That is the mechanical genre. But you can have a platformer. The platformer, the platforming part is the mechanics, but you have a story that deals with adventure, with exploration. A great game that does this is oh my god, I want to say Iconoclasts, but I might be completely off the rails. I have it on my Steam library, but it does things of that sort. An RPG role playing game. Yes, you're embodying a character, and you do that through both choices that you have with other characters as well as the stats that your character
Mhm.
increases. How you do that, are you going to do it as a turn-based RPG? You can have an action adventure RPG. You can have card-based RPG.
Mhm.
So yeah, Liana is spot on. There needs to be a distinction between what type of story are you telling and the mechanical or mechanistic genre that is being used, and those don't need to be tied together.
You mentioned Fables. Fables was fantastic. I would.
Yes.
And then
That
the comic or the game? I just want to be
well
clear.
The
both.
game.
Yeah. The thing about, Fable, this is an example of a game. The whole idea was to take a fantasy action RPG and basically make it one button combat to get around that issue of barriers to entry. I mean, we went through this with the Bossfight game, and we were deciding between straight up turn-based and more of an ATB style system. We tried the ATB for a while, and we want this to be something that someone like you can play, Tristan, who isn't aware of these classic games and get a sense of it. And the minute you're getting into quasi turn-based, quasi action, you've got kind of these action windows. It's too confusing when there's so many other things going on. We want people focusing on what kind of poo the unicorn throws at the enemy, right? Or what kind of fun combination of moves you can do so you can get a bit of a giggle out of your combat experience, as well as defeat the bad guys. But yeah, it's again, people shit on Fable when it came out. I was really surprised. I think they did a
Oh
great
wow.
job. It's a game series that has uh, first of all, it was on the original Xbox, and Xbox's
Right.
golden era was the 360 generation. So at that point it was cool to, oh, PS2 is awesome, and then shit on Xbox because
Right.
it was new. It was an RPG on console, which some purists had issues with. I thought it did what it did really, really, really well. But I think back to those games and how poorly they were received. And now to hear people speak so fondly of them, I kind of sit back and go, heh, 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 to all the people who had their noses in the air back in the day. Because that's a critic standpoint, right? That's not a creator
Right.
standpoint. And they are very, very different places. One of my favorite games of the PS3 era, got the shit kicked out of it, Heavenly Sword.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was short because they couldn't fit any more on the physical disc. That
Oh
was
my
all they could
gosh.
do because of the motion capture sequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was designed to be replayed, but it was too short. 7 out of 10. They judged what wasn't there instead of what was there. And Fable
Right.
was very similar. People wanted and here we go, meaning again. I think we found the what does meaning mean theme of this stream. But they wanted more meaningful combat. They didn't want to do sword, 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 arrow, 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 magic, 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 like
Right.
Fable did, right? They missed the point. That the whole point of Fable is button, 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 button. I know exactly what to do here. I'm not thinking, what spell do I use? What weapon? What is this with stances and hotkeys and all that stuff? It was simple, and then you could select to run around and have people call you Arseface. And
Chicken Chaser.
And Chicken Chaser,
Yeah.
and a bunch of other things. I don't know of anybody who did the heroic things. It was always Arseface and Chicken Chaser because that was fun. But this is where I get into the whole review process and the issues that the industry has in terms of, again, gatekeeping. You get people who don't understand the game they're playing, which
Right.
anybody who does anything in art criticism is subjective. Mary Jest and I were going, how, Guardian, why, what about giving the ABBA Voyage 3 stars out of 5? Like, how do you not either love or hate that album? How do you go, it was just meh, right? But this is the problem with art criticism. It's subjective, and this reviewer at The Guardian just did not get it. And you get, I mean, there's so much more to not get with video games. Somebody mentioned Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem in chat. Brilliant game on completely the wrong system for it to have caught on. If that had been a PlayStation game, it would have blown up and been amazing, but it was on like the GameCube or something like that. It was an M-rated game on a Nintendo system when that wasn't happening. And there are these really unfair things in terms of receptions to games. And I know crunch is bad, and thank you for the sound effect. Whoever just crunched. That was perfect. Crunch. But crunch is really bad, and poor pay and all that stuff, gatekeeping and hiring. But the utterly shit heel reception that perfectly good games get is something that we're not allowed to talk about because, oh boy, harassment. But it's true of any nerd thing, right? I mean, everybody's got very strong feelings about the Eternals right now, and I'm sort of like, I'm gonna sit in a hole and I'll wait until it's out on Disney Plus or something, because I don't want to have that fight, because I'm tired of those fights. And
nobody has time for that.
Well, some people do, and that's fine if that's their idea of fun, fighting on the internet about things. Cool. But there's I prefer to focus on stuff I like, which is why we're making a game about kindness and friendship. And again, kindness and friendship doesn't mean the game's going to be soft. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be snarky lines and dark moments, poignant moments. But yeah, it's just so, again, these things should not be identity. They should not be jobs. They shouldn't be full-time commitments. And yeah, people are making money off those fights, and I'll go one step further and say people aren't just making money off the fights. They're making money beating up on other YouTubers over those fights, and that's not right. And that tone, that example is being set by the enthusiast press, to the point that that enthusiast press has now become a punchline. They dropped it in the most recent Doom Patrol episode of the enthusiast press, and I'm like, okay, that is a very funny throwaway line. But we need to do something about the tone in the industry, and it's not going to be web-based journalism. It's not going to be online journalism that does it, because everything's driven by clicks, right? It's going to have to be the community, and it's going to have to be the development community and the gaming community that do it. And that was part of the reason we decided to do this, because I felt like I'd done all I could with videos about games. It was time to just sort of make a game and go, here it is, right? Think I suck. Hate me if you want. I don't care. I made something with the intent of people enjoying it. And there is nothing not good intentioned about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
And
Alice
the
said, what's the worst that could happen? We'd be last.
Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
plays it is the worst thing that could happen as far as
Yeah.
that. Nobody playing it is worse than people hating it to me.
Well, when I didn't even ask. When do I looked on the actual Kickstarter. Do you have a set date that you think it's going to be finished, or is that kind of in the air right now?
We're aiming for 2023. We're doing the Doom marketing model of we're going to be putting out like a 6 to 10 hour experience so that
Okay.
people can sample it, because I mean, one of the commitments of these games is the sheer hours
Right.
that they have. So we're going to have 3 or 4. It's the western to southern quarter of the map that people are going to be able to explore and have a complete experience. It tells a complete story with a resolution, but it's basically going to be a demo that people can try it and go, do I like this kind of game? Is this something I find fun? It's a sampler that people can, binge in an evening or play it over the weekend. We believe that if people give this a chance, they will like it. They will have fun. They will find it accessible in numerous ways, not only from a disability standpoint, but also in terms of the gameplay being very pick up and play. But yeah, we want, so we're aiming for 2023. We wanted to give ourselves a lot of time because it's better to be early than late. And then the complete experience will be coming out after that. How much later will depend on things like funding and things like how big we end up going. The development's very modular. So, um, it's that's a very long answer, sort of explaining the
Right.
answer 2023. That's what we're aiming for.
That's not that bad. Like a lot of times when you look at these things, we're nearly a year away from that. I mean, I understand you've got 12 months in that year, but that's really not that bad. Like because I have no idea what goes into making a game, none whatsoever. How much actual, you're talking about a 6 to 10 hour game. How much actual man hours is that?
Oh, a lot, because of all the, what we call like pre-production, all the character development, all the assets, all that stuff. The nice thing about RPG Maker is it's much faster than having to, get stuff from the Unity store and then customize everything, because nobody likes, just straight up Unity assets. Unity's a funny thing because it's become this industry standard thing, and it is not user friendly
At all.
Oh no.
at all. It takes a long time, but it's free-ish, right, with Unity. But that's the nice thing about doing RPG Maker is stuff comes together relatively fast.
And we're using things, one of the benefits of RPG Maker is that it uses a tile set based map system, which is, it's kind of like a puzzle. You put things together. And we have purchased a pre-made tile set, an asset pack that I have been modifying. All of the characters have been created, the main characters, their sprites were created by me, but we have, several NPC templates, we have etc. And I'm going to be modifying them and creating our own as well. But it's good to have something, and it has its own distinctive look. We went for something that looked like a 16-bit game like Chrono Trigger, because we really like that aesthetic. And it's a lot easier to make those assets than, say, sculpting 3D models, things of that sort.
Yes.
And I got another good question for you, Liana. What's more stressful, making a live action web series or an indie game?
Oh, the web series.
Oh, really? I didn't expect that.
Hair, makeup, and wardrobe, man. Fuck that. That's the worst part. That's the writing it and everything like that, that's one thing, but oh, am I going to wake up today and my hands don't work, my vision's blurred, and I'm swelled up like a blimp? That's stress, man, because that is completely out of any control.
Yeah.
Relatable.
Yeah, when you deal with chronic illnesses and stuff like that with
Let's
indie
not
devs.
talk about the editing afterwards, where you were playing 4 characters at the same time and you were dealing with Premiere crashing constantly.
Oh yeah,
no.
so many layers, so much green screen. It's a great reel now, right? I mean, one of the things I wanted to do with Bossfight is I started in television, and before that I was in theater, and it had been years since I'd been able to play characters anywhere anybody could see it, and there was an entire group of people that didn't know I did that. And it actually people kind of rebelled against it. They were angry at me for the characters at first, and
Oh my
people being,
goodness.
oh, so much, that's cringe, and I'm like, please conjugate if you're going to insult me, right? But
But it's the good cringe.
it's the good, it's cringe worthy. Give me the back half of the word. I'm a language that was what bothered me about it. Not that they were insulting me, but they were doing it inarticulately, right? I get that the whole slang, and I'm a purist, but yeah, you get these characters, and maybe part of the reason this is easier is I'm not doing it almost mostly on my own. We're delegating a lot more. There's a cool back and forth and sharing, and it's one of the times that group work hasn't sucked. There's been stresses, there's been challenges, there's been some dead ends and stuff that didn't totally work. But in terms of the kind of stress I much prefer the stress of trying to make something work. I like implementation stresses, not YouTube drama stress. And so it's nice to sort of, well, yes, here we are on YouTube, but that whole thing. I mean, I guess I've sort of ripped the Band-Aid off in the stress of how are people gonna react to Social Justice Warrior? How are people gonna react to a twerking furry, right? Those reactions are pretty funny. The reactions to the twerking pony were pretty funny.
Oh my gosh.
I sounded like
And just
Zarkazan there.
just wait until they see the higher resolution battlers doing that.
Oh, we may have to put in a twerk. I don't know. You'd have to. The pony's already squatting. Maybe we can adapt it to a twerk. I don't know. But there's so much charge behind twerking that I don't twerk as myself. Clearly, I can twerk, but I don't partake of the twerk. I would do an occasional whine. No head top and no twerk. Okay. I was very struck. Bianca's laughing. But for something like Princess Sparkle Pony, who is just, she was created to be the stuff of nightmares. and
I love that.
Yet being able to do that weird Grant Morrison on a moderate amount of drugs stuff, that's a lot of fun. But the physical strain of doing that stuff, like some of those costumes are very hard on the body.
Oh, I bet.
The Shao Kind suit is fur with rubber and more fur and feet twice the size of my feet and these big extended hands and limited vision and 3 wigs, and there is a physicality that with a video game, it's like, hey, it's animated, and yes, voice acting is a strain in its own right. I've been struggling with vocal stuff since late August, but doing the voices, doing the voices is a heck of a lot easier than, it's a different challenge, but it's so frustrating when you get a piece of footage and it's like, oh, if I just held that an extra couple seconds, if my eye line had just been an inch higher, things like that, making sure the heights are consistent with the different characters, that is a stress I am not going to miss.
I don't blame you. There, I don't know if you answered this or not, but is Glowy Box going to be in the game?
Glowy Box is. They are. Glowy Box is going to be in the game. Yes, Glowy Box is a meaningful part of the game. Glowy Box was a complete accident too. Have I ever told you guys the story of Glowy Box?
No, I don't think I. Yeah. Sorry, I had to mute it. I was coughing. My allergies are terrible. But no.
Yeah, Glowy Box came from Lady Bits, and I did an episode 0 because there was, I mean, Lady Bits was its own kind of drama, but I did a what this show is and what this show isn't. And in the comics, people kept saying they were staring at the Glowy Box. What is that Glowy Box? And I was like, what the hell's a Glowy Box? And somebody finally said, it's that coffee table next to you. It's like, oh, and this is the way I think. If they've named it, well, now it's not an it. Now Glowy Box is alive. And so what is Glowy Box? Who is Glowy Box? Why is Glowy Box? We got very French. And Glowy Box, because it was 3 kind of those translucent drawers with one of those exterior Christmas lights shoved in. I'm like, okay, it's 3 drawers. So they're collective consciousness. So Glowy Box has a they pronoun. We're going there. That is Glowy Box, and Glowy Box is the center of power because Glowy Box must clearly be a very powerful being. If this fucking light box self-actualized on me right next to me without me noticing, so that's where Glowy Box came from. The fucker self-actualized.
If you can make a Glowy Box work like Grant Morrison made a non-binary street work, you're good. Like, you've made it in life.
I don't know.
I love
This
it.
was a bigger swing to me than Danny the Street.
I think Glowy Box and Danny the Street hang out during the weekends. I think that's a thing.
There is definitely, well, Princess Sparkle Pony is right in there with Danny the Street, right? I mean those two are very the Glowy Box sting. That's a choral. The actual Glowy Box music is it's very slow, but I just sped it up like 250%, and so it sounds like it just crashing, right? Like da 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 da, and it just works so well. So we'll probably have stings like that. But
and Glowy Box is in the game, and it has it, and they have their own sting.
Yes, Glowy Box has an actual function.
Yes.
In the game, we're trying to make people's roles. Gamifying video is interesting because it's not just, oh, we can throw this character in and be funny. How are they actually useful? How can you actually interact with them in a way that's going to make sense? Mm-hmm. And because they were all gaming tropes to begin with, that wasn't that hard. The one that sort of, I think, exploded on us was Anne Reardon.
Yes.
And
she demanded her own number. I mean,
it just kept growing and growing and growing in the involvement of that character. I think just because as it sort of occupies the same space when you watch it as what's it, Mona from Schitt's Creek, like the Catherine O'Hara character, just so over the top, this sort of Cruella de Vil type thing. See what I mean? The Glowy Box. Go right for it. And people are like, what's Glowy Box? I'm like, I finally asked, what's Glowy Box? Okay.
Glowy Box demands your attention.
Yeah, Glowy Box is an extrovert, and I'm not.
That's too funny. Okay, so before we wrap up here, one last little push. Why do you think everyone, or what? Give everyone a good reason to back this. Besides, Celia said it's going to be awesome.
You're better. You're better at this than I am, Mary Just. You do it.
I am.
Okay, I'll answer this in a sentimental kind of way. back it because it's fun. Back it because you'll have a little piece of yourself. Because anytime you back the crowdfund, you back the Kickstarter, it's an NPC. You get to have your character in the game. And what we hope this whole experiment does is people will be able to get it and see themselves in the game and go, I matter just a little bit. I'm real. I'm not somebody who can just be canceled by a Twitter mob. I'm not somebody who can not exist. I'm here. It's planting a flag. It's sort of that basic human thing to, we go back to it, to have meaning, to matter. And that sounds very cheesy and maudlin and overwrought, but that was definitely one thing I had as somebody who's been, modeled in video games and had a DC Comics character based on me and all that stuff. It does make you feel different. It does make you feel like you're less than nothing. And so I wanted to share that experience for people who don't have an abnormal hip to waist ratio and giant boobs. And I finally made it not saccharine at the end. Go me.
Yeah. And we're both of us grew up on games like, I don't know if nobody has played this game, consider adding it to your playlist because it's one of the greatest JRPGs ever, Chrono Trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So that game, for example, had a totally bizarre cast. It had really wacky storylines. I mean, you're carousing back and forth through time, screwing everything up, fixing everything up. But what people remember about Chrono Trigger is the campfire scenes when the characters are sharing a moment, they're talking to each other, they're vastly very different people, but they're coming together and they're sharing something that's actually meaningful. And that's kind of a lot of what pushes us towards gaming. We want to give that experience. We want to create things that can give that experience to people. And earlier you said something, Tristan, that you felt like, for example, because you didn't know all of these obscure things, that you felt, kind of bad. Well, you don't have to. Here's the thing. And the thing about gaming is that gaming is for everyone. There's games all over the place. There's games in the past, there's games in the present, and you shouldn't feel like it's your task to learn everything. It's fun to learn things. And, if you ever want to discover the past of gaming and, the really incredible, important games that, shaped things that's totally fine, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you want to know about the history of RPGs, like Ultima, there's a great book called Desktop and Dungeons. And then there's a CRPG book project, which is free. And there's also for the graphic adventures, there's something called Hardcore Gaming 101.net presents the guide to classic graphic adventures. So all of that is there for you to discover if you ever want to. You don't have to. But the joy of discovery is that you go, holy crap, there's all of these games that I haven't played yet, that I could play yet. And that is exciting because you know what that means? That means your playlist is never going to be empty.
Yeah. And
yeah.
If people use this as a jumping off point of, now I think I understand this, I'll go and play one of these older games, which do sort of have sort of barriers. It's weird. There's been sort of a comment censorship issue in the chat, and that's too bad. Sort of talks about what I was saying of people feeling like they matter. Comment didn't get censored for me. That's what's so weird. But if people feel less intimidated to step off kind of the Xbox, PlayStation beaten path here, that's great, because there is a whole new world. But accessing it can be a challenge, and you end up sampling a lot and not finishing, and sampling a lot and not finishing, and it can get really discouraging. So that's another thing. Hopefully by building a dialogue and building a discussion around these games, we can, expose people to this older stuff. There's a succubus in the game. She's big on exposure. But as you can see where my sense of humor is going to go with this game.
I mean, so is Mouse. You've seen his armor.
Yes. Mouse's armor for me is a Planescape Torment thing with Anna's armor, and the reason I got kicked out of my first ever girl gaming group because
Oh, jeez.
I was defending this scantily clad red-headed tiefling character in like strappy leather armor voiced by Sheena Easton, but there's no stretch fabrics in medievalist fantasy. But they threw me out because I thought cool Scottish stabby tiefling rogue in cool leather outfit better than Thought Hooker. I womaned
Oh,
wrong.
yeah.
And Mouse's armor is leather and revealing, and there's a banana hammock, and
There's chaps.
that's the closest I can get to eating a banana. I can't. So the actual food, make that as dirty as you like, but it's not accurate.
There's Beelzebub.
Yeah, you see the different characters coming out when I start talking and getting punchy and don't realize that this is in public. but yeah, I mean, let's just. I think a big thing that we were doing, Mary Just and I, is we're like, let's just cut the shit with this stuff. We are both so sick of all the turf wars and the culture wars, and there's no reason that something that can't have people that don't look their skin's a shade of beige, right? They can be included without it being this super serious, we must all be good people and have absolutely no fun message. And I
Yeah.
don't like the fact that because one of the things fantasy hasn't done, I think, is delved into those really cool non-European cultures, right?
Mhm.
Like stuff with Latin American carnival, or there's a lot of, I mean, it's a Zulu headpiece. It's a bindi is a Zulu name. Things like that, different cultures, some South Asian stuff, some Indian subcontinent. Not enough of that has gotten into fantasy, and it's like this weird continuation of colonialism. Now, of course, we're not going to we're going to lecture you about the evils of colonialism. We're just going to present characters and say, we think this is cool. We hope you do too. And that's the way to do it, right? You don't beat
Yeah.
people over the head with things.
Exactly. I love it. So make sure you guys check it out. I do have it pinned in the comment and also in the description. Also, Liana, if you're unaware, I doubt, but she does have a channel that she posts videos all the time. I'll say it again. My favorite segments are always the Wellness Wednesday. I love them because I love to get a different perspective of just mental health. Nobody talks about mental health, right? And it's such a great thing. So make sure you guys are subscribed to her. Make sure you guys check it out. Anything else you guys want to add? Me and Bianca do have a video coming out tomorrow where we do the best comic pitches ever. So make sure you guys check that out. And I don't want to miss anything. So is there anything you guys want to go ahead and add? Am I missing?
Very just. I think I've made enough dirty jokes for one stream.
I think we're good.
Awesome. Bianca?
Robert did ask a question. Are you guys going to be doing voice actors? And if you are they going to be YouTubers or professionals?
We haven't announced anything involving voice cast. One of the things about this crowdfund is depending on how much money we make will determine what we're going to be able to afford.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's we have some people in mind. We've had some people say yes. But pros are they're professionals and they need to get paid.
Right.
So that's a big part of where the money's going.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right.
Oh, so they are professionals, yes?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Nice. Okay, so sorry.
There I go again. Define professional, right?
Somebody with no experience.
There will probably be a few of them. just because I find somebody hilarious and come record this, and then we're off to the races. The young man who I can't say the young man who plays the boy in episode 3 will be reprising his part because his dad said he thinks he'd be very hurt. When I asked him, I was like, "Do you think he could do it?" He says, "I think he'd be very hurt if anybody else did it."
Aw.
So he's very, very excited that he's a video game character.
That's awesome. Oh, that's so cute.
You're gonna be very
I
strict
love it.
with them. No, you have to say it like this. Show some emotion,
Oh,
kid.
no, it's not possible. The blooper reel on that kid is legendary. He was such an ad-libber. We're gonna have to put placeholder dialogue for him and then rewrite it once he's done because the kid
Yeah.
is a natural.
Nice.
That guy, he knew how to ham it up just absolutely perfectly. He needed no coaching, but there was no reining him in either.
That's so cute, though. I love it.
He was great. And it's a nice leavening with SJW's SJW-ness.
Awesome. I love it. So make sure you guys check that out. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.